Hello everyone. Welcome to our talk. Here's the title of our talk. This work is an ongoing collaboration with Ryan Lepick and Aaron Wilkinson. American Sign Language, or ASL, has at least 4 manual signs that can be glossed with the English word what. Those signs can be grouped as a family of what signs. See the 4 pictures here. Here's the main question of our talk. What's the difference between all of the what signs? Here are some possible answers. A. There's no difference. The what signs themselves are interchangeable, so it doesn't matter. B. Individual variation. The different functions depends on the individual, how they use those signs. C. Each what sign has its own function. All of the functions are different or separate and do not overlap. D. In the family of what signs, some functions overlap. Not all, but some, and so they differ from one another. And the last answer is E. I don't know. So what do we think? Well, we believe the answer is D, which is based on what we've been observing from our data, and we need to analyze lots of naturalistic data to verify our belief. The goal for this talk is to focus on the functions of 2 what signs, the number 2 what 1 and the number 3 what do. The reason for this is that the what 5 is the most common what sign, and it has been the center of research for the what movement in generative syntax. Furthermore, our observation of the data suggests that the what 5 sign has its own family of variants, like the one with sideways movement, or the one like you're holding up your hands, or something like that. So perhaps the what 5 sign has the largest range of functions because of the various forms. By comparison, the what 1 and the what do have been researched much less. When we figure out the functions of those 2 signs, we can then compare them to the functions of the other 2 what signs, number 1 and number 4. Now let's take a look at what has been documented and described about the what 1 and the what do. What we are calling the what do sign, this one has been grammaticalized from the fingerspelled word do. If you watch me, you can see how it's changed. It can either be produced 1 or 2 hands. So what are the previous old claims about what do? This slide has 3 claims. First, it occurs as a direct question. 2, it can't occur in indirect questions. 3, it also can't occur in echo and exclamative questions. Again, those are the previous claims. What 1, this 2-handed sign, has been described as an old sign. It is apparently less common among younger signers because 1-handed signers are considered more cool than 2-handed signs. Scholars have been making this kind of comment for about 30 years. So what are the previous claims about the what one? There are two. The most of the time, it tends to occur in rhetorical questions. It also occurs in indirect questions, but not as much as in rhetorical questions. So those are the claims. But they don't really inform us about the functions of what do and what one. Why is that? One major reason for not knowing about the functions of the what signs is that sign language linguist analysis tends to take a more traditional approach. That involves adopting an idealized one-to-one mapping of form, meaning to form, which assumes that individual signs have inherent meanings. That seems to suggest that the context does not really determine the meaning of the sign in which it occurs. Those are not all the approaches that we are taking. Instead, we want to be able to see the context and how that determines the functions of individual forms. This is called usage-based approach. I'll go ahead and take the opportunity to explain what that means. The usage-based approach has its own theoretical assumptions about language. First, where does linguistic knowledge come from? Language use. Second, structure and function are in a dynamic relationship, which means they are changing together. Usage-based linguistics look at linguistic structure as a network of constructions. One way of explaining it is that many constructions are organized as recurring sequences of words or signs for sign languages. Those sequences, when frequent, develop semantic associations which emerge from discourse context in which they occur. Usage-based approaches requires naturalistic data. So we used internet data, and we focused on two well-known signers, two deaf white men from deaf signing families. Alex Abenchuchan, he runs the Daily Moth, and the other is RT, Ricky Taylor, or as he's known by his alias, Ryder. He's been a long-time vlogger, posting on various topics. As you can see from the slide, our data collection, we extracted 99 tokens of what do and 37 tokens of what one, all together. As you can see here, the frequency of both forms is not equally distributed. Moreover, we found that the what do to be more frequent, indicating a larger continuum of functions compared to the what one. When we looked at the data more closely, we found some interesting patterns. What's interesting is that we have identified robust patterns of multi-sign sequences in which different functions emerge. Starting with the example of what do happen and what one happen. Those constructions are not isolated, but rather reoccurring sequences. If anyone thinks that this is attributed to an individual variation with respect to what happened constructions, we have examples of both individuals producing the other variant. Another interesting finding is that for all of the what do happen constructions, they did not occur as questions, but rather another function. In addition, the same thing is true for what one happen. Most did not occur as a question, but as another function. So let's go ahead and look at the functions of both sequences with examples. It seems the sequence of what do happen has two general functions. The first function marks a stance of uncertainty, meaning that the signer does not know what happened or what will happen. The second function for what do happen is to share new information, meaning that the signer knows the information but assumes the audience doesn't know, and so it's new information for them. We found this second function was the most common for what do happen sequence. Now let's look at the what one sequence. What one happen. Similar to the what do happen, we found that the sequence of what one happen also shares new information. Again, that means that the signer provides new information so that the audience may not be aware of what's next in the signing discourse. One interesting thing about this example, notice the sequence of what one happen is sandwiched by the what five. And we weren't sure what to do with those what fives on either end. It could be a function of a connector for the signs or a type of pause. We weren't sure, but we'll have to revisit that later. This table shows the frequency analysis of which signs tend to co-occur with what do sequence. We can understand the functions of what do better when we look at its relationship with other signs and what the signs produced together as a sequence mean. Looking at the sequences overall, it's clear that what do often co-occurs with verbs. Thus, the meaning of what do related to the action of doing something. It has changed or faded, and its meaning takes on a more abstract meaning, which is a process known as semantic bleaching. Now we'll look at frequency analysis of what one. Again, this table shows the frequency analysis of which signs tend to occur with what one. We see the what one happen occurs with what do happen, but other sequences are a little different. The what one referent means anyone did to referent another person. And that is more schematic sequence because you can replace each of those referents as in what one somebody did to somebody else. In the third sequence, we what one, up for what one, what five, what one. You'll notice that we didn't provide a number for the last sequence because we haven't figured out whether to tease apart all the variants of the what five because all the forms can be lumped into one category. and we need to figure out the function of that group of signs. But it's clear that the what 1 co-occurs with the group of what 5 signs. Again, when we look at the relationship of what 1 with other signs, we can better understand the function of the what 1. Now, looking at this table of what 1 in comparison to the table of what do, we get somewhat of a better picture of how some functions will overlap while others will not. Those frequency analysis allowed us to start identifying the general functions of what do and what 1. The outcome that we made this preliminary mapping of variable associations between the form and function of the signs what do and what 1. This looks like a network of constructions, right? On the one side, there's a family of what signs, and on the other side, there's a list of functions. Based on the data of the what do sequences, we propose that for the what do, there are several functions. Note, the box for the what do and the box for share new information are the most common function. The thick green line indicates strength of association. It's robust. The other functions of what do are not as strong. They are to mark certain types of knowledge, which includes uncertainty, and to mark direct questions, which does not occur as much, probably because of the type of data that we collected. And most of those are monologues and not much dialogue or turn-taking. Now, for the what 1, we propose that the what 1 has a few functions: to mark new information, to mark indirect questions, to mark certain types of knowledge, and lastly, to mark direct questions. However, because what 1 has a lower frequency of occurrence, we don't have enough information and do not know about the strength of the association compared to the what do. In future research, we will look at the mapping between what 5 and the hashtag what, and those functions listed, in addition to other functions, perhaps even identify new ones that we have not yet found. The takeaway message for what's in a what is that multi-sign sequences of what do and what 1 reveal a complex mapping of meaning to form with overlapping functions. And that calls for two things. One, we need to reassess our previous understanding of what signs in ASL, as it seems that we do not have an in-depth understanding of how these what signs function. And two, we need to pay closer attention to the sequential relations between signs. That is to say that we have a lot of research that focus on what we call simultaneity in signing because of the use of space, but less research on the sequential aspect. We cannot forget about the importance of both. Thank you so much for coming to our talk.